Hey guys, welcome back to Leuk into Leukemia. My name is Nick, and this is episode 5 of the podcast. So, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your interest and your support because I've gone through something that not a lot of people have gone through, and to be able to share that with you guys and impact you that way is more than I can ask for. All I want to do is just touch so many people's lives with my story and be able to spread awareness because, and especially in the form of a podcast, because there's not a lot of podcasts about or by cancer patients. There's a lot of books, there's a lot of other types of media like websites, blogs and stuff. But podcast specifically, I feel like is something that definitely called to me because I'm big into audio. So that was something that would be fun for me to work on a podcast, but it'd also be easier for me to share because I'm not a writer, I'm not an author, so just speaking is definitely a lot easier for me. But with that said, we'll go ahead and get into the episode. And this episode I'll be honest, it was very hard for me to sit down and talk about this. I avoided it for a while, and I usually write down a rough plan of what I'm going to talk about, and then I just kind of talk through it. I don't really read from anything. And for this one, it was hard to sit down and even write a rough plan because this episode is about the mental aspects of cancer treatment and the mental battles that I went through. It's so personal and it's so vulnerable for me to get on here and broadcast to my audience and to really open it up to everyone because anyone can access this podcast. And it still is something that I'm not entirely confident in and comfortable with, but I want to do it, and I want to let you guys know, some of the thoughts that I had, some of the thoughts that I still have, and some of the ways that I got through them and persevered. So I'll go ahead and start by saying that after my diagnosis, I was super positive. Like obviously I had some negative thoughts, but I didn't really let them take seed in my mind and grow. I stayed mainly positive, and I can attribute that to the great support that I had with my family and with friends as well. So mostly during treatment, I didn't really spend time on negative thoughts. I wasn't angry. I wasn't lamenting. I was good for the most part. There were a few days where maybe I broke down or I was weaker than others, but for the most part, I was what I thought in a good place mentally. So looking back on that, I think the reason why I didn't really have any mental battles during treatment was because I blocked out most of my emotions during that time. And I didn't realize that until in recovery, like 6 months after my diagnosis. But what I had done is I just completely closed off my heart to any emotions because emotions might lead to weakness, which I didn't have time for because I had to fight each day, actively fight each day. So there was no room for any weakness. And so that was why during treatment, I didn't really have a lot of negative thoughts or I wasn't in a bad place mentally. And I think the people that I live with, my family, they can testify to that because I was always in a good mood. I was always generally happy. Well, I like to think I was in a good mood, but I was always generally happy and in a positive mindset. But I also was pretty closed off. And in hindsight, I wish I wasn't so closed off because that sort of did hinder my ability to meet other cancer patients during treatment. Because I remember while I was in the hospital, like some of the nurses would encourage me to talk with other patients and stuff, but I didn't want to meet anyone or talk with anyone because I was so focused on myself and I didn't have room for friendship. I didn't have time to meet people because I just had to do me. But during treatment, I didn't want to meet anyone. I didn't really want to talk with much people. And in general, I was just closed off into myself. And that was not the best way to process those emotions. To just bury them away was not the best way at all. But did it work? I'm here today. It worked, and I'm now able to share my story. But I do recognize that that wasn't the best way of coping, and the reality that I had to come to accept is this: I'm 19, and no 19-year-old should ever have to hear that to no fault of their own, their body's just failing them, and that they have a limited time left without treatment. And then furthermore, if treatment doesn't work and their body doesn't respond to that, then there's not many other options. So you can imagine how difficult that is. And as I said, during treatment and immediately after my diagnosis, that didn't really register within me. It didn't really resonate in me until after my transplant, because things had slowed down a lot. I was going from being in the hospital or at the doctor's office slash infusion center like 3 or 4 days a week getting treatment, and I was actively fighting, literally actively fighting every day to get up and walk, to sometimes eat, and to ultimately make the most out of my day, because every day is a blessing. No day can be taken for granted. So during treatment, that was one of the things I tried to do, is just make the most out of my day. I remember a few days where I slept all day, and I beat myself up so badly over that, because it felt like a waste of a day. I hated it, but there was nothing I could do because I couldn't just not sleep. I was exhausted. So I was actively fighting during treatment. And after treatment, I was no longer actively fighting in my eyes. I was just waiting to recover. I was resting, letting my new stem cells thrive, and giving them the right nutrients, and resting, giving them energy. So everything slowed down, and it was finally time for me to process everything that I had gone through, because I was diagnosed in August 15th, and then I was discharged from the hospital for the last time on December 23rd. So this all happened within the span of 4 months. A life-changing event in the span of 4 months. A week before my diagnosis, those 4 months, where did I expect to spend those? At school, working, having fun with friends. I did not expect to be going through chemotherapy, radiation, a bone marrow transplant, and end up a completely different person at the end of those 4 months. So after transplant, it was time to finally slow down and process everything that I had gone through, and it was a lot to process. I think I learned so much more about myself in those months than I did in the previous 19 years of my life. So those months and those trials that I went through were character shaping, and they really made me who I am today. So I mentioned that, as a cancer patient, you really have to come to terms and accept the fact that your body is failing. It's real. You also have to come to terms that, if treatment doesn't work, our science and our medicine is limited, and cancer is a very complex thing, especially when there's all these other things happening in the world, like the pandemic. That adds a whole nother factor into it. So coming to terms with your illness is one of the most important things that you can do. And another thing that we had to come to terms with is the fact that we're not guaranteed a month from now. We're not guaranteed a year from now. We're not guaranteed 10 years from now at all. That is one of the hardest things that I still wrestle with today. As I mentioned, I try to make each day a blessing during treatment and really live to fulfillment each day. I still have that mindset to this day. Every day I try to do something to make me appreciate the day, something fulfilling. And I think that's a great thing that we can do, healthy or ill. So just really appreciate and live fully every day, because, like I said, every day is a blessing. You can't take any of it for granted. So as a cancer patient, we have to think about all these things. And it's hard. It really is. If you're a cancer patient, then I'm sure you can relate. And if you're not, I'm sure you understand. But just me speaking on it right now doesn't really doesn't really relay the depth and the gravity of the situation and the reality of those thoughts that you're having, because those thoughts of death and those thoughts of your illness coming back are in the forefront of your mind a lot of the time. So a normal 19-year-old and normal young adult shouldn't be thinking about death and limitations and their quality of life being awful, but a cancer patient has to have those thoughts. And like me being diagnosed at 19, I had just moved back from college because of the pandemic. I was having what seemed like the beginning of my life. So it was just hard to process how this could be so close to the end. But another way that I tried to see things was that I tried to look to see that when the glass was half empty, it was also half full. So yeah, I was diagnosed at 19, but what did that mean? It meant that I was younger. I was able to go through pediatric treatment, which is harder, more intense. And I also had my whole life ahead of me. So I didn't have any pre-existing conditions already that would limit or cause other complications. I didn't have to really put on hold anything in my life. Like, I didn't have to quit work. I didn't have to worry about seeing my kids or my wife or anything, because all I was doing was I was in school, which is so easy and so flexible to just drop out or take a break. So I was 19, so there was that good aspect of that. And then I was also diagnosed in the year 2020. So in the year 2020, our modern medicine is much more advanced than it was 50 to 100 years ago. I mean, 100 years ago, I don't even know if they were thinking about a bone marrow transplant. I mean, taking someone's stem cells and then putting them in a whole other person's body, that's a crazy procedure. Like, when you think about it, it's an insane procedure. So that was also a small blessing and a silver lining. And the other thing that I sort of wrestled with was, it was me diagnosed. It wasn't my mom, my dad, my brothers, my nephew, my grandparents, anyone in my family or friends. It was me. And I wanted to take that. I felt like I could do well. And I don't want to say much better than anyone I know could have. But I think, especially within my family, I was in the best position to fight cancer and be diagnosed. And so that was a blessing as well, because I don't know mentally, at least not at this point, because I'm still drained. I don't know if I'll be able to see any one of my family members go through cancer and not be scarred. Going through it and seeing someone go through it are two completely different challenges, but both are incredibly difficult. So if you or anyone you know is fighting cancer, just please know that I pray for you and I pray for them, and you are a warrior as well, because I can't even imagine seeing someone go through it. So there were those silver linings and those small positives that I could see where there were negatives. And obviously, comparatively, the negatives are much, much more heavy. But if you don't focus on them and then you try to see the positives in every situation, then you'll be thinking about positives, not negatives. So it's so easy to get overwhelmed with negative thoughts. But I came to terms with reality and I kept my head up and I walked on through treatment. But after treatment was when I really began to start having mental health issues. And that's because I was at the weakest point that I'd ever been in my life. 4 months of just beating me down again and again with chemo, radiation, a bone marrow transplant. Physically and mentally, that was the lowest I'd ever been. It was hard. I was exhausted. And as I mentioned, throughout treatment, I just put on a mask and blocked out all those emotions. But now it was time to process those. So everything slowed down, and then really it was just day to day, do whatever I want. I had more energy than I did through treatment. So, I had feeling back in my fingers. So I was able to play guitar. I was able to start lifting weights because I had the PICC line removed. And things were starting to look up. And then I started noticing that I was just kind of, I don't want to say grumpy, but just kind of down or grumpy or sulking frequently. And didn't really think anything of it, because I'd just been through the ringer. So I started noticing those things, and then it was about the end of no, yeah, it was the beginning of March, around the end of February and the beginning of March. I got sick. I started getting sick. I had a post transplant virus, which was called the Epstein-Barr post transplant lymphoproliferative disorder, or short EBV-PTLD. And this was sort of like it was just sort of like a bad mono. So my lymph nodes were killing me. I couldn't even hold up my head without my lymph nodes hurting. So I just laid down all day. The sore throat, the little bit of cough, congestion, headache, just the normal stuff. And my mom had just been laid off from her job because she needed time to be my caregiver and to take time or to take care of me. And she got her insurance through her job. So we had to switch insurance because she just got laid off. So that was a little bit of a headache getting the new insurance. And to put it nicely, they were being a little difficult with us. So I got this post-transplant virus and I was feeling awful. And actually, this specific post-transplant virus, if not treated, can actually lead to a form of lymphoma. So, reading all those things on the internet and feeling sick was not really good for me mentally at all. And insurance, they kept denying the medication over and over again after appeal after appeal. They kept saying, you don't need this medication. And do I know why that they think I didn't need that medication? No, not at all. Actually, the person who was saying I didn't need it wasn't even an oncologist. They weren't a cancer doctor, a blood cancer doctor. So they kept denying that for me, and I was sick. And so my doctor, at this point, I had shared with her, some of the bad feelings that I was having. Like I was just, down often. And so she not share with me. She prescribed me an antidepressant medicine that she wanted me to be on while I was sick, because while I was sick, she didn't want me to get, into the sunken place and get down, depressed. So at that point, I wasn't really depressed or anything, but we just wanted to prevent that from happening, because I had these thoughts and these feelings, and they were real. We acknowledged it, and I shared that with my parents as well. And it was hard. It was really hard to come forward and even talk with my parents, nonetheless talk with my doctor about it, because there's just such a sense of vulnerability when talking about emotions and mental state. So it's not easy by any means, but it's necessary to recognize that and to open up, in a sense, to someone, a safe person, who will support you and help you. So back to the story. I had this transplant virus, and insurance kept denying me the medication. I was worried. They put me on an antidepressant, and this was like 100 days after the transplant, so I had a pretty brand new immune system, and it was impressive, because the insurance kept denying the medication, and they denied it for so long until they finally approved it. And then, like, I was about to get started in a few days on the treatment, but like as soon as they approved it, I started getting better. My immune system kicked it, and I started healing, and I got through it, which was incredible, because my immune system was so weak at that point that I was not expecting that. I don't know if the doctors were expecting that either. So that was a great test for my immune system. But nevertheless, I went through the virus. I came out good, and then I was still on the immunosuppressants, because she ordered, I think, like 30 or 60 days of it. And they also offered me to meet with the social worker from my oncology unit regularly to sort of talk about everything I'm feeling and maybe get a diagnosis. And I considered this, but ultimately I decided that I would just hold off on that for now. I would wait to see how I'm feeling on the antidepressant, and now that I'm not sick anymore because I kicked the virus, maybe I'll see an improvement. So I opted not to do that at the moment, but I definitely advocate for that if you are someone who thinks that you can benefit from that. Speaking with a professional is one of the best steps you can take. Getting back to the story, this was around 100 days after my transplant, and around this time I had just heard of and read the story of someone who passed away who had leukemia, and they had passed away with the same exact thing that I had after transplant: double pneumonia and sepsis. I don't know this person personally, and I don't know their whole story or all the details, but that really hit me like a truck. That made me question everything. All of a sudden, I was feeling awful that I could have that and survive. Like, how come I had to have sepsis and pneumonia and live, and this person didn't? That didn't seem fair to me at all. And this person was young as well. So just trying to process that was so challenging, and I didn't understand at all. And especially it was God timing as well, because I had literally just read in the Bible a story and a verse. The verse said, "The Lord will provide." And I read that, and then to hear about someone passing from cancer, I don't see the Lord providing there. And so I was struggling for a long time with, okay, how is God providing in that scenario? Where is he providing? And that was hard. It was very hard, and it took me a long time to get over that. And I still do have a little bit of survivor's guilt. I won't lie. I do feel bad. I feel awful sometimes that I could go through things and it's nothing to me, while other people go through that and they leave scarred, or they don't leave at all. But getting back to the verse, "The Lord will provide," it took me a lot of time, wisdom, and maturity to understand what it means for the Lord to provide, because we have to recognize that we're not promised anything. We're not promised anything in this world, not health, not family, not riches. We're literally not promised anything. But as humans, and especially in this modern age, we have egos. We have huge egos, and sometimes we feel entitled, like we're owed this by God, or that we're owed this by each other. But that's not the case. As a matter of fact, God owes us nothing. God created us. But that being said, I'm not saying that it's unacceptable to question God or what's in his will, because of course I was a little angry with God after my diagnosis, and I didn't understand. So it's perfectly acceptable to question God and be angry. But if you're at that point, then I just encourage you to get into the Bible and see what God says, and be in prayer and see what God says. But we're not promised anything, and as a result of sin in the world, this earth is full of illness, full of persecution and death. We see it literally so highlighted right now in the world with what's going on in Afghanistan and what's going on with the pandemic and with cancer and stuff like that. There's just a lot of pain and grief in this world, but you know where there isn't is heaven. And the Bible, God never said that there won't be pain in this world and suffering in this world, but he did say that in heaven there will be no suffering and no pain. So do I want to go there? Absolutely. Especially after what I'd been through. So how did God provide? Well, he provided for us a way to get to heaven through his son, Jesus Christ. Everyone knows the story. Jesus died on the cross, rose on the third day, and forgave us for our sins. So what does that mean? Is that he forgave us all for our sins, that all who believe in him and love him shall not perish but have eternal life in heaven. And it's not through anything we do that grants us that, but it's all through his grace and through our faith. And so reading the Bible during this dark period was a life changer. It was just, getting in the word and seeing what God says, the creator of this earth, the creator of the universe, seeing what he says and reading all the things that he left for us, and reading about his son Jesus was, I think, eye-opening and really healing for me. And especially because of all the uncertainty revolving around death that cancer brings. I have to bring it up. I have to address it. You know, when you're diagnosed with cancer, death is now, circling around in the forefront of your mind. You have to accept it. You have to realize it. But you also have to sort of start to ponder life after death, and if there even is a life after death. And I read around, and I certainly had enough time to think while I was in the hospital. And I was a Christian before my diagnosis, but being diagnosed, death is now urgent. So you have to consider more things. You have to deeply consider death soon. So that was another really gravitational pull towards me reading the Bible and sort of understanding deeper what Jesus means. And the best way to do that is through prayer and through actually reading the Bible. It wasn't even like the cliche passages that most people will read, and the standalone verses that most people will read about mental hardships and stuff. It was just reading the Bible generally, like reading from the beginning of Genesis up through Leviticus, and then reading just through the Gospels and reading about Jesus. Just reading through the Bible and seeing God's love for us despite everything in us that's evil and everything in the world that's evil was so compelling and eye-opening and healing for me. So that was how I got through a lot of my mental health issues. But there are other ways that can help too. And another part for me that helped was obviously being on an antidepressant. I was on that for a little while, and then I was able to get off of that. But another thing that helped was I joined a support group, and I hate to say it, it was online. I hate online stuff, but we have to do it because of COVID, and cancer patients are immunosuppressed, and it's hard. So it was an online forum, and I do believe it could have been so impactful for me if it was in person. And it was still impactful to sort of speak with other cancer patients and hear their story. But that was really good as well. And the other thing which actually inspired me to start this podcast was the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada has a podcast called Bloodline, and they meet with cancer patients on there and they discuss different aspects. And there was a few episodes they met with younger cancer patients, like young adults around my age or a little bit older. And to hear them speak and to hear them go through everything I went through, and then to hear them come out unscratched and strong, that was so reassuring to me, because that was one of the things that I struggle with. As bad as it sounds, I struggle with the fact that I did so well during treatment. And I still do struggle with that because I am young. I'm only 20, but I'm okay with everything that I've had and everything I've experienced in life so far. That everyone else who has cancer, like, I sometimes I just want to take the brunt for them. I want to take the hit for them. I'll go through it and they can be happy. And it does sound kind of bad sometimes because I was so widely and hugely blessed. But I just think I wish I could take more for everyone else. It's hard. It is. Especially now that I've been trying to connect with more patients and connect with more people, hearing their story, it's inspired me greatly. And it's just really also brought forward a lot more thoughts like this that I'm saying, where I feel a little bit guilty, but just wishing that I could do more with my blessing. And that's sort of the reason why I started this podcast, is just so I could share my story, and share anything that I can that could help anyone in any way, because cancer is an awful thing and no one should have to go through that at all. If I can even help one person in even just the most minute way, then that'll have fulfilled me. All I want to do at this point is just use my platform and my story to inspire, to help heal, and to encourage other cancer patients, and maybe not even just cancer patients, but anyone who has an ear, and wants to hear. So I'm on episode 5 of the podcast, and the reception that I've gotten so far is is incredible, for lack of anything else to say. I mean, if I even got one person listening, two people listening, then I would see that as a win. But I have a lot of people listening, and I've heard a lot of good things, and I just want to be able to reach as many people as I can, and especially cancer patients, because I wish when I was going through treatment, I'd closed off my heart to everything, but I wish I didn't, and I wish I looked for more opportunities to hear from other cancer patients, and stuff like that. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone once again for tuning in. I think that's going to wrap up this episode, but next week we'll be back for our last episode, and it's going to be a little bit of a reflection for me, because it's going to be about the lessons that I learned going through leukemia and what my life looks like now. So I hope to see everyone there.